All right, hello, and welcome to another episode of Indie Creator Exchange with me, Jake Jacobs. I'm here with Kurt Brugel, as always, and we just got finished taping an episode of Making Turbo Pit Fighter on our other channel. But here we have David Moses with us today, and we're going to learn all about David Moses. And we have some samples here of his output. There's a lot of cool stuff here to go over. So why don't we start out by welcoming David and saying hi? How's it going, Dave?
Hey, excellent, excellent. Thank you guys for having me. I
Mm.
appreciate you reaching out and connecting. I really am
What we do?
encouraged by your work, both of you. So
No problem. And so, Kurt, why don't you let the audience know how did we find David?
We found him through Instagram. Been working on a lot of sword and sorcery material. I have to give two thumbs up to Instagram of the last like 8 months to a year, because the more and more I keep like finding people's work, it keeps suggesting stuff.
Good.
And David's stuff started coming in the feed. And I was like, well, who's doing this? And of course, and the moment I went to David's profile, I said, "Oh, I gotta reach out and make contact with him." And of course, I always love the idea of just being able to have this exchange, as that key point of getting know each other. As the three of us are going to chat today, but
Yeah. So
I
for
have to
all,
also say, so just one more thing is, thank you again for being a part of the exchange. Everybody, so they understand if this is their first episode and you're an indie creator, we send our current Turbo teaser in exchange for a comic book or a zine. And then of course get you on and we get to talk comics. I have read Tales from the Holy Mountain, Annihilation and Apocalypse twice now.
oh
And I know because every time, and I think this is the magic, this is just me before, we get into all the things, questions, for you, David, but there's something magical about black and white art in comics that you miss that first time over. And when you go back through, you're like, oh crap, I didn't see that. Oh crap, look at that. And then once you do that again, you're going to want to come back to it. So I just want to thank you for just keeping that feeling. It's like carrying the torch
yeah,
forward on it. So, but yeah. So the first question we actually have is your process. So let us have it. Tell us about your process.
yeah. So let's see. It's interesting for Tales from the Holy Mountain. I had connected with Danny, who runs Holy Mountain, who's now one of my best friends. But initially, we just kind of connected over our shared love of comics, especially Silver Age, Lee Kirby, Ditko stuff.
yeah.
And so after meeting him and after saying, he was like, hey, maybe we should do something together. That was a huge thrill for me because I'd been a fan of Holy Mountain for a while. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Holy Mountain. They make uh, merch for metal bands, and sometimes they release
Mm.
records, and they've got all sorts of things under their umbrella. But so when Danny suggested a collaboration, I was thrilled, and like literally on the drive home, the idea for the first issue just like dropped into my head, and it was almost like I couldn't write it down fast enough. You guys know that experience?
Oh
Yeah.
yes, oh
Yeah,
I
yes.
got
Were you
I
still
got that.
driving? Were you
I
still
was.
driving?
I was driving. I was
Driving and writing.
out. Yes, pulling out of the parking lot, and I'm like, oh, yeah, yeah, okay, now, okay, yeah, okay, now I know what happens, and this is where we're gonna go next. And then literally, I think that day I sat down on the couch and I did not thumbnails, but just like a sketchy outline for everything. And I stuck pretty close to that. So for the first issue, I wrote out a full script after I did all of the why is that word escaping me? The
Treatment,
Yeah, basically,
synopsis.
just like a blocky version of it, just
Yeah, outline, synopsis.
yeah, an
Right.
outline, basically. Um, anyway, I did a full script from that, and I worked from a full script, and I did that all in about 8 days. The not
Wow.
I drew it all in about 8 days. Let me put it that way, because I was
So like when
isolated.
God created the universe, kind of thing.
This is this is my black and white universe.
The Holy
I
Land.
was holed up in my room in isolation from my family because this was still early COVID and there was no vaccinations yet, and I had gone to my brother's wedding, so so I was isolated, and I was like, let me knock this out while I'm in here. And so I did the first issue like that, and then the second issue, I was like, okay, I've got an idea for how to continue this. And I did a looser script, not quite as detailed or involved. And then by the third issue, I was writing it as I was doing it. So like I kind of had a general sense of how it was going to go. But it was very much like um, developing the words onto the page, very kind of seat of my pants. And then by the fourth one, it took so long to do it because it was just very like um, involved in how am I going to draw this all together, and try and give it some sort of satisfactory conclusion. And so
Right.
it's funny because like the first issue, I was extremely prepared and extremely organized, and it went very quickly. And then it started to sort of break apart as the issues went on and
It's
take
like
longer and longer.
it's like every band with the first album compared to
Exactly.
compared to the follow ups, right? Um,
Exactly.
why don't we back out a little bit? Because we didn't get your bio or your mini bio. So
Oh,
where are
yeah.
you calling in from today?
So I am I'm just outside of Raleigh, North Carolina,
Oh,
in
are
a
you
small
okay?
town. Yes, yes. Thankfully, it was more in the western part of the state that got hit.
Uh-huh.
We got wind and rain, but it wasn't bad for us at all, thankfully.
Yeah. So if folks,
Typically we get those hurricanes,
yes,
but
you're in the belt, right? If folks don't know what we're referring to, we're just to timestamp this. We're just coming on the heels of Hurricane Helene, and then like I don't know, like 7 or 10 days later, there was Hurricane Milton, and it
Milton,
was
yeah.
devastating to some areas, including Asheville and all over. But there was inland, there was tornadoes. We were talking. I was telling Kurt that my missus is down in Florida, and they're talking about um,
Hmm.
crocnadoes. All right, or like yeah,
Gator NATO.
gator nados, right? Gay tornadoes. They're
What?
washing up in the weirdest places, and you got to be you got to be careful. Um,
That is wild.
so take us through.
It's Florida.
Let's go back to about age 12 and take us through your your influences. Well, we have this conversation with everybody, and a lot of the answers are similar. So let's see
Yeah.
um, how this all lines up. But take us back to your childhood, and you see some comics on the stand, or maybe it's TV for you. All different things, toys. What really lit a fire for you?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm 40. Just to give you an example of where I fall in the timeline, and I have two older brothers.
Right.
So I
Ah,
was uh, there was a lot that I did not have to discover for myself. A lot that I was brought into culturally,
Right.
and I'm kind of I'm very grateful for that. My brothers are really awesome. They were. inclusive rather than being like, oh, stupid little brother, you can't hang out with us or
Yeah.
whatever. They brought me in and sort of like, brought me close, and I appreciate that about them a lot. So, grew up playing with GI Joes and watching all of the various '80s franchises and everything, and then um, early on, I developed an interest in drawing because my dad was really good at sketching,
Right.
um, and uh, but I never, even though I would take art classes and I would do pretty well for my age. I always had a difficult time finishing stuff,
Typical.
bringing any kind of idea through to completion.
Yeah. It's the same here.
Yeah,
I have so many like unfinished projects from when I was a kid.
Me too.
I'm gonna put them out sometime. Then just like you know, and then
yes,
turn the page and there's nothing.
right, yeah, exactly. I look
but
through my sketchbooks from then,
yeah,
and
but
it's
that
just like, half figures that are like fully formed, but only, like just the torso is done or whatever. And I'm
yeah
like, man,
yeah.
if I
Well,
had the discipline then to pull through,
one day when you retire, you'll finish the other half.
that's
But
right.
yeah. So now take us through your first actual works. I mean, and give us your whole
Sure.
discography. I mean, you got some whole like handmade zines here, and I
Yeah.
see that you're like you have a lot to say on all these different topics. This is great. But take us through like your first work, or maybe your first toe dip in the biz.
Yeah. So I put down drawing. I got into music and I put down drawing for at least 10 years. And then um, there was a point where I was sort of in between cities. I used to live in Winston-Salem, and I was commuting to Raleigh for work, and I didn't really have access to the musical equipment that I was used to for expressing myself. And so I had begun to read comics again and appreciate them, and kind of appreciate them on a whole different level than before. And I decided to start writing comics.
Well,
And
what titles are you talking about when you got back into it? Because a lot had changed. Like for me, it was always like the 60s and 70s Marvels. I mean, I was like Marvels were maybe like 25 cents when I was a kid, and so
right,
that whole era, or 20-cent Marvels I like even better. But um, when I got back into it later, there was nothing for me. I mean, it was only the indie space that really kind of like lit anything up, and like graphic novels, and like maybe even like adult stuff, heavy metal and Milo Manara and stuff like that. So what
mm,
was it that sparked you? Because you came back into the field, right?
yeah, yeah. It was well, one of the things was I had never read Watchmen, and my oldest brother let me borrow it, and I remember reading it and being just I don't know, I felt
Inspired.
yeah, and I felt seen in a way of like, oh, there are things that you can deal with that are more complex and more I didn't know that you could accomplish these kind of things through comics. And
Yeah,
so that
very.
was one thing. And then Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics, I remember watching a YouTube video and a guy recommended it, and then I saw it somewhere else, and then I picked it up and started reading, and I was like, this is, I've always been drawn to this art form, and this is giving me uh, a whole history and reasoning behind
Yeah,
why this is important.
yeah.
Um,
McLeod is always he's always pretty good on like the language of comics, and
yeah,
the vocabulary of comics, the tools, right?
very
So
clearly, just
what'd you make?
here are the elements. Hmm?
So that's so great. So what did you make?
So I started writing some stuff, and but it wasn't until um, a few months to a year after I started writing comics that it was August of 2017 when I started drawing my first series that I ended up putting out called Galactic Junk Squad. Well, more like family.
Okay.
Um, and it was basically like someone described it as New Gods meets Arrested Development, and that's a little bit generous because I look back on it now and I'm like, wow, this is really lacking in so many ways. But yeah, it was basically like space hillbillies that go through these crazy adventures, and that got me back in. That got me connected to the indie comics community. I
Hmm.
remember when I remember pre kayfabe, and I remember when they launched and how um, you know significant that moment was within the group of friends that I was with. A friend of mine, Corey Cochran, that I worked with, and he he was really anticipating that launch, and I remember getting connected through that, and yeah, which I don't know how you guys feel about that whole situation. There's so much there, but it
Yeah,
was a
Lots to unpack.
significant
we
gathering
had a couple
point.
of episodes with segments when it was all unfolding. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, there's so much about that, but I do really appreciate those guys for creating a sort of collecting point for indie creators, and creating a voice, and even a voice to to challenge. Somebody's got to say something in order for somebody to have a different point of view, and they just started very strongly, making a declaration, and like, we love comics, and here's some comics that we love, and it was a very, very exciting time in like 2019. And then of course the pandemic hit, and I was people were looking for, I don't know, people were figuring out what to do, and it gave a lot of
Yeah.
folks the motivation to start trying stuff. And I put together a project with several friends, including my friend Corey that I mentioned, but Jasper Jubinville was a part of that, and he did like 5 or 6 covers for this project. And I just caught him at a really good time, and it was very, very exciting at that around that time. Um,
So you're starting to put stuff out. This was all self published. Was this
yes.
just copier based comics?
No, I had gotten in touch with this guy in Pittsburgh, this printer Ken. He his company's called Ken S,
Okay.
and I had printed my stuff through him, and it's really great quality stuff. I do recommend Ken.
Yeah,
And
this is a very thick cover and cover stock and glossy too, and this really gives a lot of protection. People don't think about it, but over the years, this will really keep the comic in better condition
yeah,
over time. So maybe people should think a little bit more about that. And it's also a pretty substantial book here. This one that I'm holding, page count wise and paper stock wise.
mm,
You got the glossy pages. It really kind of jumps out, especially with the black and white. Usually, you think about like your image comics with all that like high flying colorization, but
yes,
you know, uh, people should consider the difference between matte and glossy with the black and white too. And then,
hmm,
so right, Kurt, this is a little bit different, right?
It is. It is. It's very well made, like physically, but even the more importantly, the interior art is so it's so well executed. I have this question though, because this morning when I was going back through it again to get refreshed, I have to ask the question: is there any digital going on here, or is this solid pen and ink to paper?
Um, Great question. So everything is traditional except for like on that page that you just turned
Oh yeah,
from on that
yeah. I
cover.
think I. Yep, yep.
So the
That's the big one,
yeah, that is
right?
digital, and then
Okay.
inside the Tales from the Holy Mountain, that is digital. But some of
Okay.
the stuff I like scanned. The
The
grayscale.
screen.
Yeah, the screen. Thank you. The screen tones,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I sort of like underlaid them. So what I try to do with anything that I do digitally is sort of mimic the process of how it was done in the production
Yes.
department.
Yes. Yep.
Um, so I try not to do a lot of digital manipulation. I try to accomplish it all traditionally as much as possible.
Right.
Yeah, because there were areas that this is not a critical point. It's just a fool of the eye that there was like a calmer, like the computer can always calm out lines,
Yeah.
digitally, even if you're
Hmm.
trying to get that roughy brush thing. So
Hmm.
like, but for the story consistency and getting the calmer areas, I should have made a mark, put something down. But I was like, well, maybe he came in. Well, like this here,
Yeah.
this hood, the hood, it has a way more calmer feel in execution than sort of you know everything else kind of going on. So I was
Mm.
wondering, I wonder if that was like an additional thought, like there might have been just the hand, and then digitally went in, and then but no, I mean, once again, you're supporting the whole.
Well, here,
Really
Kurt,
well thought out, well planned out, and well executed.
yeah, Kurt,
Thank you.
let me ask it like this: what are the tools? So, in Tales from the Holy Mountain,
I,
Annihilation, Apocalypse, what are the tools? It looks to me like brush, but are you doing marker? Like, what are your tools for this?
So for those books, I was trying to keep everything with like archival ink. So if I use a pen, it's either a like a G pen, dip pen, um, or a micron. Um,
Okay,
and then if I use a brush, I would use one that's I use actual ink on. It's not like a brush pen. I use brush pens now, but for that one, for some reason, I just wanted to execute everything as like, traditionally as possible. That there's something about that really appeals to me. Participating in the tradition of comics making.
yeah,
Um,
it's a good education.
yes, it
It's a
teaches
really
you
good
so much.
education.
This is the best way to
Yeah,
learn is to do it.
yeah.
a respect for the tools.
Right.
Yeah, because I see a real tension between your thick medium and then your thin medium. We really evangelize these right here. These are the high tech C
Ooh.
pilot. There was some kind of like a patent dispute where these were only sold in the Eastern Hemisphere for a long time.
Oh
Um,
wow.
but they come in point 0.25, point 0.3, point 0.4, and point 0.5. You could even get colored sets, but I have these in black, and then I like literally have like a can of refills where it
Wow.
runs out. You just take this part out and then just replace it, and you use the handle
Oh.
again and again. So I swear by these when we're doing like fine line work. And
Yeah.
it's great ink, it's a great line. And, especially if you're super ultra detailed. And I was because I'm wondering, you do have some areas like this, but you have a real variance, right? Like these thin strokes here, and then so this is all micron, and you're just kind of like varying the pressure. Is that what's going on?
Yes, it's on issue 3 especially. It's either Micron or probably G Pen. Um,
What's the G pen exactly?
So the G pen is like this fella right here. It's used by a lot of manga artists. It's like sort of a thick
Wow.
nib,
Oh,
very
so
flexible,
Yeah.
right. So that's a
and
dip, that's a steel pen or a dip pen, right? Or a
Yeah.
yes,
Steel
crow quill.
brush.
yeah,
So yeah, I
Yeah.
never heard those called G pens before.
yeah.
Um,
It's like the manga equivalent of the Hemp 102, basically.
yeah, I love giving those to my students for the first time, sixth, seventh, and eighth grade, because they're just like, wow, this is so cool. And I'm like, yes, for hundreds of years, this is how
Yes,
pens used to work.
yes,
So that's really
absolutely.
good. You are, you know, like I almost feel like you need to put like a picture of that in the back because you know that
Ah,
it gives you a whole appreciation when you're doing that. And I know it all comes together in the end, and people don't know, but that is a very classic tool to use, right? That's
yeah,
like a very traditional comic booky, India ink applied to real paper, before you do any like digital stuff. And so it is a throwback, and a lot of younger creators now, I mean, they're not even using paper at all. They're just
yeah.
using like digital tablets and styluses.
Jake.
Yeah.
So here's the real question: are you hand lettering?
Yes,
Yeah, it looks like it.
yes,
So like,
yes.
once again, like I every time you answer the question, you're verifying that how well put together this comic book
Oh,
is.
thank
I mean,
you.
we haven't even touched the story yet. But once again, you had me fooled because I was like, well, maybe he's got like some triple variation font that he's made in some. I mean, your hand lettering is just fantastic,
Oh, thank
David.
you.
Really
Thank
is, and
you.
it adds that extra depth that most
Yes,
indie comic artists don't want to take.
yes, yes.
It makes
You
such a
know,
big difference.
Well, Kurt, you didn't
someone,
get your copies of Letterer Ledger number one
yeah.
and
I do
two?
have that. I do
Oh, okay.
have that, but
Okay.
I was just giving him a, come on.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. That does mean a lot to me.
You're welcome.
One of my great inspirations, and he's become a friend as well, is Michel Fife. I mean,
Yes, that's
he's unbeatable as far as I'm
yeah,
concerned. As far as comics
yeah.
making in the indie market goes, he's unbeatable, and I just am in awe of what he's been able to create. And everything being on the page to me, especially in the black and white form. There it is, that
It's
beautiful.
never far away from me.
Yeah,
It's never far
this was
away
one
from
of
me.
Kurt's first comics that we covered in Comics That Influence. One of the probably one of the first 10 episodes, right?
Yeah,
Good stuff.
it's just a perfect book to me, Copra.
Oh yeah,
And
oh yeah.
I want to be able to, there is, like you're saying, there's a depth of like having everything on the page, especially in the black and white era stage, having everything on the page communicates something subliminally, or I don't know exactly how, intangibly or tangibly, but it means something to me, like,
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, so looking through this, generally speaking, you have a pretty nice balance of word to picture, and because you're a writer and an artist, right? So,
hmm
um, you know, it's also a real plus for me because when Kurt was like, oh, what is Jake gonna say? I'm very hard on comic creators and the typography. Um,
mm,
just my OCD. But I
sure,
didn't notice anything. Like because
Yeah.
to me it's only when you get distracted, that you have something to say. And for
oh,
me, it was like, oh, I'm reading the words, I'm looking at the story. I'm not distracted because the lettering is too
Nope.
big or too little, or there's too much line spacing, or
oh wow,
or it's illegible. So you have, this is a real plus. And a real quick story. When I was in the '90s, I was interning for Valiant Comics in New York
oh
City,
wow, Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, look, I have one day a week that I'm free. Can I come in and I'll clean the garbage? I'll do whatever you want. I just want to like, get on the inside and see what's going on. And so I did that for, like maybe like every Wednesday for like a month or two. And then they offered me a job for $11 an hour doing lettering because they didn't have anybody. And they
Wow.
gave me a little tryout and I was decent in lettering, but I wasn't like this great letter. And I was like, wow, that was quick. And so sometimes that's actually the way in, if you want to work for one of these bigger publishers or even just freelance that way. But I see what you're doing. You're like the jack of all trades guy, doing putting it all together, right? And yeah, so I wanted to not just call out the lettering, and you have these different styles, right? Depending on who's talking, you have this like shaky lettering and stuff.
Hmm.
You got the bold lettering sometimes, right? And then you have the sound effects lettering. You talk about it. You have different languages going on. A lot going on with the lettering, and then you have these pages, which reminds you kind of like a heavy metal page, like Drew Ye or something. You
Thank
know,
you. Yeah.
sometimes they have this artwork on the inner sleeves of these like heavy metal bands and stuff. Doing stuff like this. You got to understand the pillars of hell and the Templar, right? Um,
Exactly.
so it's really nice. I wanted to get back to you though. So to ask you because the Kirby influence is definitely in here,
Yeah,
and
Yeah.
yeah.
when you're laying stuff out, like are you like channeling Kirby, or is this just a natural outgrowth of your own personal style? Just like growing up with Kirby, or what percentage of Kirby are we seeing when you're doing your creative process?
That's a great question. So Kirby, I think I could talk about Kirby for months without stopping. Okay. Like Jack Kirby is enshrined as my heart as a saint. So it wasn't until though maybe 2015 or 16 when I really rediscovered him and like latched onto him
Right.
in a very intense way. Because early when I was younger, I was drawn more to people like John Buscema, whom I still is one of my favorites. But I was looking for accuracy. I was looking for realism, and it
Right.
wasn't until 2016, like his centennial, I think, when I started to realize that Jack created his own language,
Yeah,
uh, and
Yeah.
and that's something that only the greats are really capable of. I mean, you know, Mignola is somebody who's also created his own language in a similar
yeah,
way. You know,
Uh huh.
uh, but Jack created his own language, and the terms of it are so accessible and dynamic, and he tells you exactly what he's trying to tell you.
Yeah.
And so for Jack, there was a lot of absorption of his work into what I was trying to do, especially with Galactic Junk Squad. Well, more like family. I was
Right.
trying to channel Kirby as much as possible, to varied effect, but um, I can't
Overstate.
be
Can't
Jack Kirby.
overstate the influence. Yeah, to me, like Kirby, the language that he creates, it's more like in the latter part of his career, right? It's
Mhm.
after he leave. Well, yeah, just about the time he leaves Marvel, goes to DC, um,
Yeah.
because he creates this new kind of style. And I told Kurt I hated it when I was a kid, you
Hmm.
know, and it was like, oh no, John Buscema, Neil Adams, like these guys are
Yes.
realistic, right? And
Yes. Exactly.
Kirby's not realistic. This is like, and I didn't want to call it cartoony, but I didn't have a word for it. And
Sure.
then like you get to a point where like you rediscover it. It's like, wait a minute, this is actually the best stuff ever.
Yes.
and
Exactly.
and the reason why is because the style is built out of necessity,
Yes.
because the guy's doing like 3 titles a month.
Yeah.
And John Buscema's lucky if he does like one or one and a half, maybe. All those realistic guys. And so he was so prolific, but it was also like, open up any Jack Kirby comic, any panel, and you have instant Andy Warhol pop art,
Yes.
Lichtenstein pop art too. And it's the way that he kind of like throws the blacks and the whites in together to make this kind of like light and dark balance that
Hmm.
isn't realistic, right?
Right.
It's not there because it's realistic. It's there to make balance and just to
Hmm.
make visual interest there, and it goes against realism. So it's
Right.
like impressionism or something new is Kirbyism. And
Yes.
and so I really share your admiration for the King, Jack King Kirby.
Yes.
And I will always pick up a book where those influences are evident. And
Mm.
I think a lot of other people do
Jake.
too. Yes.
Yeah.
So let's move to how are you promoting yourself and your work, David?
Ah. Well, um, so I am very fortunate because my day job is in art. Um,
Oh,
Oh.
I work with a designer out in LA, and so I get to sit at a drawing board and just work on cool shit all day. Um,
wow.
That's a
Who do
dream.
you work with?
it's a guy named Warren Lotus,
Okay.
and I do just art for him, basically stuff that can be developed into his style. So as I have been working with him, the sort of necessity when I was doing the first 2 issues of Tales from the Holy Mountain, I was a freelancer, and I sort of was driven by the need to make and accomplish in order to provide for my family. And when I got this job, there's a lot less pressure on my comics creation or illustration of my own brand, if you will, to provide. And so over the past maybe 2 years, I have taken my foot off the gas a little bit and
Right.
just kind of um, I'm I'm in a place where I'm sort of really sharpening and deciding what I want to do and how I want to do it and how I want to approach everything. So I do go to a couple of cons. I try to make Noise in Norfolk, um, and which is a small con, but it's typically the one. Sometimes I'll do a Richmond Comic Con. I try to do Heroes every year in Charlotte, which is
Uh-huh.
really great. Are you guys? Have you guys been to Heroes yet?
Not yet.
Not in
Okay,
Charlotte. No.
it's I highly recommend it. It's like one of the sort of last bastions of a comics con, that's not really invaded and dominated by
Plushies.
Marvel Media,
Right.
Disney kind of stuff. Um,
Right.
so I do recommend if you ever get a chance to go to that. So it has changed for me since it is not something that I rely on for bread and butter. And so right now I don't know where you can get Tales from the Holy Mountain. Maybe you can bug Danny at Holy Mountain Printing to put it up on his website, or you can call the Vault, which is a sort of outlet that Holy Mountain and a local comic shop has around here, and they may have a copy, open for purchase. I don't have my website up as far as making sales anymore. I used to have a Patreon. I used to have a, what is it,
A little
one of
storefront.
those e-commerce sites, right?
Yeah.
And I, like shipping and that the whole logistics thing, if I'm not dependent on it for my sustenance, is like a complete bear for me. It's very difficult to
So,
get motivated to do that
yeah.
stuff. So um
Since this is our little marketing section, why don't you tell us about the relationship you have with Holy Mountain? So,
mm,
because I hadn't heard of them, but they are a merchandiser and they do band merch, right? And
yeah,
so I guess they
yeah.
work with a lot of different designers, and they're carrying your comic because you kind of teamed up on the name. Is that what's going on?
Yeah, so what's great is Holy Mountain basically lives by a philosophy. They have a magazine. It's called We Do What We Want. And Danny lives by that philosophy as far as business. He has great instincts on and great taste. And so what he basically he just does whatever he's interested in, and the people who are interested in that flock to him.
So it's a
Um,
it's a curator. He's a curator.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great way to put it. Um, so we started developing a friendship, and sort of like a relationship. I had brought over some of my early comics to him, and um, you know, and then, like I said, he was like, "Hey, maybe we should work together," because his philosophy is, I want to do whatever I want to do, and so maybe I can just should work with my friends. So he you know, he works with a bunch of bands. He works with a bunch of great artists. Alexis Zarit. There's a guy out in Brazil that he works with that does some incredible stuff. His handle is Abercrombie Inc. I think his name is Hugo. He's
Hmm.
really excellent. And so, I just felt very honored to be working among this milieu. And he's basically, the way that this book started was, he was like, you know what? Why don't we do a mini comic and a little like 9x6 comic, and then I'll send it out in every order leading up to Halloween
Oh,
as just like a
wow.
special little treat. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. So
a piggy bag deal. That's cool.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he just sent it out for free in like a couple thousand orders, and just as a thing to be like, I do what I want, and this is, someone that I like and a cool thing that I like. So here, have this, and we did the same thing for the second issue, and then the third issue didn't really get distributed, and the fourth one only comes with this collection. Um, but we did put it all together. He was like, very encouraging, very, helpful in making all of this stuff happen. I mean, I really owe it to him, his drive and his ability to make things happen. Um,
That's very kind of ingenious, thing. It's a win-win. You're getting exposure, and his customers are getting a cool little bonus thing. And then
exactly,
sometimes there's like a magic that happens where they're gonna now follow you, right?
exactly. Yes, I'm still like, you know, trying to figure out. It's hard for me to figure out, like, how did this stuff happen? Like,
Uh-huh.
how did I get to be a part of this? But yeah, this is that's
That's cool.
basically how things developed with Holy Mountain. Yeah.
Right. Cool.
So,
And so, have you also tried your hand at album covers, T-shirt designs, all that kind of stuff?
Mm.
Because you seem to be wrapped up in the metal scene a little.
I have, so with the company that I work with, the only two things that I'm like prevented from working with outside of that company are uh, projects related to music and apparel. So I'm pretty exclusive as far as that goes now.
Uh-huh.
I did do some illustrations for a friend who has a publishing imprint. So I did illustrations for a couple of her books, and I was getting into a little bit of book design, and I had done some sort of like public art projects, where like the city of Raleigh had some open calls back in 2020 that I responded to and got to work on, and
Yeah, some street art. Yeah.
mhm. So uh,
So
yeah, I'm sorry, I kind of
lot of different
lost.
Yeah,
commercial art applications here, and
Right,
a lot of comic book artists, a lot of comic artists do branch out, because some of those things might be, nice little paycheck, or
for sure.
or maybe like, helping out a friend or a business or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jake.
Yes.
All right, so we're gonna start wrapping this up. The big
Okay.
question I always love putting out to our guests is, David, what do you think the future of comics is, and also piggybacking what you hope it becomes?
Mm. Ah, that is a great question. Um, I think I think the future of comics is going to be. Um, I think people have realized within the past 5 or 6 years that it's very difficult to make a living doing comics, and so I think that people are going to modify that goal, in an industry that does not at all support that. And what I mean is like, just doing it for the love and making it anyway, uh, but not tying one's whole personality or sense of success or failure to whether or not they get hired by anybody or their indie comic, becomes a runaway bestseller, because that just, I mean, that happens to what Charles Burns and David Klaus and or Dan Klaus, excuse me, and like,
And my favorite thing is Monsters Lady.
yes,
She's the latest, like, one in a million
Emma
story.
Ferris,
Yeah.
yeah, and you know what? She made the comics War and Peace. Like, I remember reading the first volume of that, and I was blown away. Like, this is,
Yeah.
I didn't know you could do this with comics,
Yeah.
basically. And that's kind of what it takes, is like, I mean, it's like a 400-page volume, the first one.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that comics are headed into a direction of, obviously they're more and more popular, more and more accessible, which is great, and they're more and more independent. I think people are just using. I really appreciate that the language of comics is being used a lot more. So, what do I think? I think that comics will become more influential as a medium. I think it'll become less viable as a career. I think that that shouldn't matter, a whole lot. I think that people should sort of maybe anchor themselves to something that provides the ability to do comics, but not in a way that, like, um, they put all of their eggs in the comics basket. I really hope that that's the case. But then again, you have people like Michel Fife, who makes it work, and he made it work by, I mean, blood, sweat, tears, determination,
The
grit.
grind.
Yeah, that guy made it happen, and he had all of the elements to make it happen. Jasper Juvenville, Nate Garcia. These guys, like, have all of the stuff to make it happen, and those guys are young. Like I said, I'm 40, so it's for me to, like, my book, as proud as I am of it, is not going to make the kind of waves that carry me to great success, in this indie comics industry. And I'm okay with that. Um, I just want to be a part of the conversation.
Yeah.
I hope that comics grows into something that is, that people just feel a little bit more comfortable and relaxed about, right? Like,
Yeah.
when I go to shows and conventions and I see creators setting up their tables and they are just sweating bullets. I hope I make this amount of sales, or I catch the eye of this kind of person.
Right.
And I've been
And that,
there.
that that awkward feeling you get when you're just walking by and they're like, "Hi, hello, hi,
Right,
hi there." And like, "Okay, pal, I'm just going this way. Maybe I'll come
right.
back later."
Yes. My friend Adam Casey, who's a great artist in Winston-Salem, he has this sort of like voluntary association called the Soft Cell Society, where it's like, hey, listen, I'm not going to jump out at you when you cross my table. If you want something from me, then you're going to buy it, so I don't have to like, you know, put the screws on you here to make a sale and
Right.
guilt you into a
I
sale. And I
love
really
that.
appreciate the
And
approach.
I love that. And just so people don't get confused, this is not the Soft Cell Society that's dedicated to the English synth pop duo from the 1980s. Tainted
Exactly.
love. Um, this is Soft Cell, SELL, and I really really appreciate that because I'm like that too. I try to be very laid back, let people come to you,
Yes.
and if I don't make back the money for the table, oh well, I figured that in. I figured that going in.
Right.
And yeah, but different people are in different situations
Yeah.
monetarily. I've always found jobs. I'm a school teacher, so I don't have to worry. Maybe that's, I wouldn't say it's a luxury. I'm just a middle class dude, but
Right.
yeah, no, but I mean, you do sound like you are living the dream. If you have a full time day job where you're getting this creative outlet, and maybe at the end, Kurt wants to plug that designer that you work for. That sounds like some interesting stuff too. Your comic work, it just seems like it just falls perfectly within this community that we're building up, and the quality of it, the ideas, and then you have this kind of like overlap with the music scene. We're getting a lot of that with our creators. Like we should,
Mm.
Kurt, we have to just do one episode with like just bandies and just like plug everybody's bands, and stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but there's also like this this kind of like Kirby vision in there, and there's
Mm.
also this like throwback vision, and we're also going forward, right? So
Yeah.
you're creating these books. Maybe this gets compiled into something thicker later on, and
Yeah.
who knows what can happen around the corner. But um,
Absolutely.
but Kurt probably wants to keep us on schedule here, so.
Yes, I do. So
that,
the Indie Creator Exchange
Yes.
is exactly as we described in the beginning. I reached out to David through Instagram based on his amazing work and said, "Hey, do you want to do an exchange?" So he does have a copy of our Turbo teaser, and of course, this is where Jake and I really, flourish, is being able to hear somebody else's point of view, whether it's in the way of like questions, or like, why would you, or why won't you, or have you thought about this? So
Mm.
David, please let us have it.
Well, I mean, first of all, I think it's fantastic.
Well,
I'm
thank you.
getting this almost like, especially with the figure of Turbo Pit Fighter, I'm getting a very Crumb aesthetic. Crumb,
Thank you.
is that?
Yes, ding.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which, I mean, I love. So look, I love recontextualization. I really
Yeah,
really love it, and the
me
way
too.
that you're bringing this element of Crumb, figure work into a totally alien to Crumb outlet. is really exciting to me. Um, I mean, I think it's really fantastic that it's a developed voice. You know, visually, it's I love how complete each panel is. Um, you know how fully rendered each page is. You know, there's people like Frank Miller, right, who can get away with like a silhouette in a blank panel, right, or
Minimalism, yeah.
maybe with no panel borders, right, and just two figures fighting, and that's great when you're Frank Miller and you can do that effect, right? The thing is, Frank's doing that intentionally,
Yeah.
and you know, when you have the sort of awareness to do it intentionally is cool, but in the meantime, when you're developing a world, I think it's important to, and this is something that I'm trying to incorporate for my next big project. Uh, when you're developing a world, it's important to communicate the atmosphere of that world as much as possible. And I really feel like you guys accomplished that. Um,
Thank you.
I I don't know what I would say in um, you know, as far as a critique goes. I don't know what I would say. I love that it's hand lettered, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Jake, you're
Yeah.
doing the lettering, is that right?
Kurt's doing the lettering on those
Oh,
teasers that you're seeing, but
it's
I do the lettering in pencils ahead of time, and then we have this whole convoluted process, which is mind-numbingly overdone. But we're streamlining it, so
Oh,
it's a good question.
it's
We are streamlining the process right now.
yeah. Well, you know, I can see that this takes a lot of work for both of you, and I look forward to seeing how you guys develop your collaboration process. And at the same time, it's like those things, you know, it's like you mentioned earlier, you know, like a first album, for example,
Yeah,
is going to be so expressive of
the
every element of your capability and your limitations, right? And
right.
then as you go along, you're going to sort of make up for any limit or surpass limitations and stuff like that.
Yeah,
And
branch
what's
out a
great
little.
about this is that you guys have by that work that you're doing, that intense work that you're doing together, you have surpassed a lot of those, you know, maybe hiccups, and so now like streamlining and making it more efficient is an exciting a part of the process to me. I'm really excited to see it. um,
Yeah, we're and the interesting thing is that we're doing it all online. We have this this process based podcast where we just literally ask questions of each other, and we kind of sometimes we bicker, and sometimes we have to retool things and take two steps back, and we've been documenting this. Kurt keeps saying that the podcast is going to be bigger than the comic one day, but we were both inspired. We got back together after a while, after a long time not hanging out, and we got back together. And Kurt's telling me about this comics kayfabe channel, and these guys are going over comics, and they have this huge following. And I'm like, well, why don't we do something where we're just drawing? Because we're going to meet every week to work on this project anyway. Why don't we just do it
yeah.
where we're drawing? And
Beautiful.
to me, it begs the question: why aren't more people? Now that someone's doing this, why aren't more people doing this?
Yes.
But
Yes, I
I
appreciate
guess
the
that's the
trail that
time.
you guys are blazing with this too. You know, like you're showing that something can be done this way, and that's important for people to see because even if they don't do it the same way, they're going to say, "Oh, how do I do it? What way do I do it?" And that's important. So,
Yeah,
Well, I also, this is where I interject. God bless Jake, because Jake takes half of the stress of making a comic book.
mm,
And I personally, this is just my own point of view, and because piggybacking, David, on what you were saying earlier about the future of comics and how it is not a financially viable place, it's also contradictory to me to want to do it completely by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
There's just such a wealth of, even in our bickering moments, Jake and I feel I definitely come out going, oh man, I'm not focusing in on really what's right for Jake and I's comic, that type of thing.
Mm.
So you
Yeah.
have to rework your own approach in order to compromise to get the greater good out of it.
Yeah.
Also to just give a little more depth to when I say the podcast is going to be bigger than the comic book has to come out. So the podcast keeps Jake and I true. Like,
Yeah.
how many times have you, as an individual, said and heard other people say, dude, I'm going to do this comic.
Yep.
It's going to be 28 pages and it's
Yep.
going to be awesome. It's gonna. But then what happens is the moment you then go into your room and you're like, okay, where do I start? All right, I'm still excited, blah, 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 blah. But then you get to those things, and writing is such a chore to me. It's
Yeah.
such a chore to me. But being in the relationship, with Jake, as not only
Hey,
a
whoa, whoa,
friend, but
whoa.
obviously,
Well,
but obviously, obviously in our comic book and other arts endeavors that we've done, Jake is very quick to give the perfect solution, in my
Awesome.
opinion. So, then I'm always the grunt and the one that kind of makes polish, if you will, to
Yeah.
then, and then Jake, we get that like, well, what if this? Then we get into the compromising of tweaking and stuff. So just like Jake said, the thing is so odd because we're coming up on 3 years, March of next year doing this. And
Mm.
it's like the only thing I can come up with is exactly what I just said. People you're being held to the fire now because you started a YouTube channel,
Right.
and then the second thing is, I've got to compromise how much to this other guy. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like, how much am I going to allow my voice to not be heard, seen, in comparison to somebody? Because relationships. Luckily for Jake and I, we have a history, so we've already hammered out all the silliness. We kind of know. We pretty much know each other's character. You can kind of predict in your head, like, well, if I ask Jake this, then he's probably going to do that, but I'm still going to ask him, and then, oh, he surprised me. You do get into those places, but I'm telling you, once we get the first issue out, then all the people as fans, you will call them, are going to then look back at the 200 something episodes and go, oh, I see.
Yeah.
And then use that, hopefully, for Jake and I being both educators
right.
as
Well, they're
well,
not
art
going to.
educators.
Yeah, right. I mean, and that's the angle that Kurt made me see it from. Like, we're trying. I mean, we're doing our bit here. We're making a comic, but I'm a full time teacher. Kurt has been a art teacher, instructor. College, all this kind of stuff over the years. And what we want to do is we want to make a template for people to have their creative ideas and then check in on us and see, oh, okay, this is how they got this thing done.
Yeah.
It's
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
painstakingly,
Yep.
patient. I mean, nobody's gonna like, binge every episode. That's not happening, right? But
Right.
when the comic is out, they might say, all right, let's go to this. Let me just click on a random, like, episode and say, wow, they're making page number 13 here, right? And they're thinking about, like, what happens next, and then there's just something they take away, and just seeing the realities of it, but also seeing the possibility when you're doing a collab, right? Because we're like,
Yes.
dynamic duo or whatever, inker and penciler. I do most of the writing, but Kurt's my sounding board. And then,
Mm-hmm.
Kurt's also like, I'm very lucky to have Kurt because he's doing a lot of the SEO and the posting and editing and
Awesome.
online stuff,
Marketing. Yeah.
because I just want to keep my head down and, write and draw, write and draw. And, the
Yes.
writing is a lot faster than the drawing for me, but, that's the way it worked for us. And then everybody else, they find, how they fit in, to a workflow, and they find how they can do stuff, and, maybe the process is more a part of it than people thought, right? Maybe it's
Mhm.
not as much about the product as it is about the
Yeah.
process.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. The process is so rewarding, and so fulfilling, and also very difficult, and you need that encouragement to get through it, and you
Definitely.
guys providing that is really important. It's going to be important for somebody, uh and good job. Good job for
Thank
that.
you.
I
Thank
appreciate
you.
you guys. I saw
So
Turbo Pit Fighter, and I thought these are, folks who are approaching things the same way that I'm trying to approach them. And that's always encouraging for me. So I thank you guys.
awesome. So we have definitely come to the hour mark.
Yes.
We like to keep these episodes bite sized, but David, we want you to know that we're going to get you back because
Okay.
we're not the one and done. Like, oh, check David Moses off the list. We don't ever have to talk to him again because we just interviewed him. It's quite the opposite because we still have this stuff to go through. So
Yeah.
we might even just set up a time, just to sit down and go through these amazing zines, which are just so deep with comic book esque material.
Mm.
So that's going to be a thing. But as you've said, you're working on a project right now, and we always ask our guests to stay in touch with us, whether it's Instagram messaging, YouTube comments, emailing me, and if you have something and you want to promote it and you want to get on, we're more than welcome, more than happy, excuse me, to do that. But we also want to give you the last portion of the podcast here. Just tell us where to go. What you're working on. And the such. So take it over.
Okay, great. Thank you. First of all, thank you guys both for having me on. This is great. It's fun. It's very enjoyable. So, anybody who's interested in my work, you can find me on Instagram at d.moses.l. And yep, there we go. And if you are desperate to find, some kind of some one of my comics, I'm sure I could direct you to the place to find it, even if it's not from me. But I do have a project that I'm working on that will hopefully be done by Noise in February, and I will definitely want to get back with you guys and go through that, because it right now it's been at least a year since that Tales from the Holy Mountain. I finished that, and I haven't put out anything since. And I typically like to keep things within a year, and so this will be a new development of where I'm at. And anyway, um, yeah, thank you guys. This is great.
You're welcome.
Fantastic.
You're welcome.
Great, thank you. Yeah, we'll definitely talk again, and we'll get into some of this stuff, and I'll have my homework done next time. So it's d.moses.l on
Hmm.
Instagram, and everyone should
Yes.
follow David. And if you follow us, follow him.
Awesome.
Links in the description. And David, hold tight because we're going to do a little after show. But thank you
Okay.
so much for joining us, and we will see you again.
Indeed. Thank you.